The morning of my 68th Thanksgiving, I woke up to the smell of nothing. That was the first sign. Every year for 41 years, my wife Marion would be downstairs by 6, coffee already brewing, the turkey in the oven before I even opened my eyes. The smell of sage and butter and something warm would pull me out of bed like a hand on my shoulder. She'd been gone for 3 years by then, but somehow I still expected it. Still woke up reaching for a scent that wasn't there anymore. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling of the bedroom we'd shared in the same house in Columbus, Ohio for 37 years. The house was paid off. The savings were healthy. I had my pension from 30 years at the county assessor's office, Social Security, and a small investment portfolio that my friend Harvey, a retired CPA, had helped me build over the years. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't hurting either. I was comfortable, and apparently that made me a target. My son called around 8 that morning. My older one, the one I'd put through Ohio State, the one I'd co-signed a car loan for when he was 24 because his credit was still thin. His voice was warm in a way that should have made me feel good, but instead made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, though I couldn't say why at the time. "Dad, we want you over early today. Stephanie's been cooking since yesterday. The kids are excited to see you." My daughter-in-law, Stephanie. They'd been married 11 years. She was pleasant enough, always smiling, always saying the right things. But there was something behind her eyes I'd never been able to name. A kind of calculation. My wife had noticed it too, years before she got sick. She'd said it to me once, quietly, in the kitchen after they left from a Sunday visit. I don't know what it is, but she's always adding something up. I told Marion she was being unfair. I wish I'd listened. I got to their house in Westerville around noon, a bottle of wine in one hand and a pecan pie from the bakery Marion used to love. My 2 grandkids, 8 and 11, came running to the door. That part was real. Whatever else was happening in that house, those kids were genuinely happy to see me. I held on to that. Dinner was good. Stephanie had outdone herself, I'll admit that. Turkey, stuffing, sweet potato casserole, green beans with almonds. My son poured wine and kept refilling my glass without asking, which I noticed but didn't comment on. We talked about the grandkids' school, about football, about the neighbor who'd put up Christmas lights in October. Then, around 4 o'clock, while the kids were watching a movie in the other room and Stephanie was supposedly cleaning up in the kitchen, my son sat down across from me at the dining room table with a manila folder. He set it down in front of me like it was nothing, like it was a grocery receipt. "Dad, I've been meaning to talk to you about this for a while. I just think, given everything with Mom and you being alone out there, it makes sense to get some things formalized. For your protection." I looked at the folder. I didn't touch it. "What kind of things?" "Just a durable power of attorney. Standard stuff." Harvey actually helped me put it together. He slid it toward me. "It just means that if something happens to you, God forbid, I can step in and handle things. Bills, the house, medical decisions. You wouldn't have to worry about any of it." I picked up the folder. Inside were 3 pages. My son's name was printed as the attorney in fact. It covered financial decisions, real estate, banking, everything. "Who drew this up?" I asked. "A friend of mine from work. He's an attorney." "Does the state work?" I nodded slowly. I set the papers back down. "I'll think about it," I said. Something moved across his face, just briefly. Annoyance, maybe, or impatience. He covered it fast with a smile. "Of course, no rush." There was a rush. I could feel it. I drove home that night and sat in Marion's chair in the living room. The blue one she always claimed was the most comfortable. And she was right. And I thought about my son. I thought about how he'd been calling more in the past 2 months. Stopping by unannounced, asking casually about the house. Had I thought about downsizing? Had I talked to anyone about a reverse mortgage? Was the upkeep getting to be too much? I'd answered honestly each time. No, I was fine. No, I didn't need to downsize. The house was mine, free and clear, and I planned to stay in it. I thought about the manila folder, about a friend from work who happened to be an attorney, who happened to draw up a very thorough power of attorney document on a holiday week. I'm a slow man. I've always been slow and deliberate. 30 years at the assessor's office will do that to you. You learn to read documents. You learn to notice what's in them and what's missing from them. That POA had a clause in it that was not standard. I'd almost missed it in the moment, but it sat with me on the drive home. It gave my son the authority to transfer real property on my behalf without requiring my signature at the time of transfer. My house. He could sell my house. I picked up the phone and called Harvey. Harvey didn't panic. That's why I called him. He said, "Come over tomorrow morning. Bring the folder if you have it." I hadn't taken the folder. I told him what I remembered. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Don't sign anything. Don't tell your son you called me. And tomorrow, we're calling a real estate attorney." His name was someone I'd never have found on my own. Patricia Owens had retired as Columbus City Attorney and now did private estate and property work out of a small office on North High Street. Harvey had worked with her on a case years before. She was 63, sharp as a tack, and she did not waste words. She listened to me for 20 minutes without interrupting. Then she said, "Tell me about your accounts. Do any of them have your son listed as a joint holder or beneficiary?" My stomach dropped. 6 months earlier. In a moment I now saw clearly for what it was. My son had helped me consolidate my accounts at a new bank. He'd driven me there. He'd sat beside me. He'd said it would be easier to have everything in one place, simpler to manage. I'd been tired that week. I'd had a bad cold, and I let him do most of the talking. The new account had my son listed as a co-owner, not a beneficiary. A co-owner. I didn't say anything for a moment. I just looked at the potted plant on the corner of Patricia's desk. It was a peace lily, the same kind Marion kept in our kitchen. I focused on it. "What does that mean?" I said. "It means he can access those funds right now, today, without your permission." I checked the account balance on my phone, right there in her office. It was $17,000 lower than it had been 2 weeks ago. I want to be honest about what that moment felt like. Not for sympathy. I'm past needing that. But because I think anyone who's been through something like this deserves to have it said plainly. It doesn't feel like betrayal, not at first. It feels like a math error, like you misread something. Your brain won't accept the correct answer because the correct answer means the person you raised, the person you held in the hospital 38 years ago, made a decision to steal from you, to scheme against you. And the mind simply refuses that for a few seconds before the colt comes in. The colt came in. "Patricia, let me sit with it." Then she said, "Here's what we're going to do." What followed was 3 weeks of very quiet, very deliberate work. Patricia filed to remove my son as co-owner of the joint account. Because he was listed as co-owner rather than a signer, this required documentation that the account was opened under misrepresentation, which, with my statement and the timeline of his increasing involvement in my finances, was buildable. She was careful to say it would take time and there were no guarantees, but she was confident. She also helped me open 2 new accounts at a credit union my son didn't know about. I moved my pension direct deposits there immediately. Harvey helped me contact the investment portfolio custodian to add a verbal confirmation requirement for any transfers, a code word that only I knew. I also called a locksmith and had the locks on my house rekeyed. My son had a key. He'd had it for years. I hadn't thought about it until Patricia asked, "Does anyone else have physical access to your home?" The hardest part wasn't any of the legal or financial maneuvering. The hardest part was Thanksgiving weekend, when my son called to follow up about the PO. "Dad, did you get a chance to look at those papers?" I kept my voice completely level. "I'm still thinking it over. You know me, I don't like to rush." A pause. "Of course. But it really is just a formality." "I understand. Gives me a little more time." After I hung up, I sat in the blue chair again. I did something I'm not embarrassed to admit. I talked to Marion. Not the way some people do it, not really believing she could hear me. Just out loud, because saying things out loud makes them real, and I needed it to be real. I said, "I think our son has become someone neither of us would recognize, and I'm going to handle it. I'm going to be okay." I believed it when I said it. That helped. 6 weeks after Thanksgiving, my son showed up at my door unannounced. He had a woman with him I'd never met. young, professional looking, carrying a messenger bag. He introduced her as someone from the office who helps seniors with estate planning. She shook my hand and smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. He said they just happened to be in the neighborhood. Nobody just happens to be in the neighborhood with an estate planner. I invited them in. I made coffee. I was unhurried and completely calm, which I could see unsettled my son slightly. He'd been expecting, I think, an old man who was tired and grateful for the help. They sat at the kitchen table. The woman opened her bag and produced a document. She started explaining it in the pleasant, slightly too slow voice people use when they assume age means diminished capacity. Another POA, more comprehensive than the first one. It included healthcare directives. I let her finish. Then I said, "Before we go any further, I want to make sure I understand this correctly. I'd like my attorney to look at it." The smile on the woman's face held but thinned. My son said, "Dad, you don't need an attorney for, I'd feel better with one," I said. He tried a different angle then, concerned son mode. He talked about how he worried about me being alone, how the house was a lot to maintain, how there were communities, nice ones, he said, very nice, where I could have everything taken care of and not have to worry about anything. He meant a facility. He meant getting me out of the house. I looked at my son across the kitchen table, the same table where he'd done homework as a kid, where we'd eaten 1,000 dinners, where Marian and I had sat on a Sunday morning and looked at each other and just been happy. And I said, "I'm not going anywhere. This is my house. I paid for it. I intend to stay in it for as long as I'm able. And I'm very able right now." He started to speak. I kept going. "I also want you to know that I've retained an attorney. Her name is Patricia Owens. If there are documents you'd like me to sign, you can have them sent to her office. And I've made some changes to my accounts that she advised me to make, so if you are planning to follow up on that, you'll find things look a little different than they did." The silence in my kitchen was total. The estate planner woman put the papers back in her bag. She said something about giving me time to consider and she left quickly. I gave her credit for that at least. My son sat there for another moment. The look on his face was not guilt. I want to be clear about that because I think sometimes people expect guilt. There was no guilt. There was something colder, an assessment, a recalibration. The eyes of someone who has realized the plan needs to change. He left without saying goodbye. Patricia ultimately recovered $14,000 of the $17,000 from the joint account. The remaining $3,000, she said, would require more aggressive action, and she was honest with me about the cost-benefit. I told her to let it go. $3,000 to understand clearly who my son had become was not the worst price I'd ever paid. The joint account was closed and my name was removed from the bank entirely. My credit union accounts are in my name alone, with Harvey listed as the person to contact in an emergency, not as a financial authority, just as someone who can be called. I updated my will with Patricia's help. My son is not in it. My grandchildren are, through a trust she structured carefully so that he cannot act as trustee on their behalf. I changed my phone number. That was a strange one. I'd had the same number for 20 years. But he'd started calling from different numbers when I didn't answer his regular one, so I changed it. I gave the new number to my grandkids' school, to Harvey, to my neighbor across the street who's looked out for me since Marian passed, and to my younger son, who lives in Portland and who, when I called and told him what had happened, said almost nothing for a long time and then said, "Dad, I'm so sorry. What do you need?" That was enough. It's been 8 months now. I still live in the same house. The peace lily Marian's sister brought me after the funeral is on the kitchen windowsill, and it's the healthiest it's ever been. I've gotten better at cooking. Not good, but better. I have coffee with Harvey on Tuesday mornings. I go to my grandkids' soccer games when my daughter-in-law, my younger son's wife, not Stephanie, sends me the schedule. I don't hear from my older son. Once, about 2 months ago, a certified letter came to the house. Patricia advised me to let her handle it. She did. She told me afterward it was an attempt to claim I had promised him a loan, documented by a text message that had been edited. She sent a response. We haven't heard back. I'm telling you this because I think about all the people who look like me, older, alone, comfortable enough that someone else wants what they have, who don't have a Harvey, who don't have a Patricia Owens on North High Street, who let their son or daughter sit across from them at the Thanksgiving table and set down a manila folder, and who reach for the pen because they don't want to make things awkward, because they raised this person, because surely it must be fine. It might not be fine. If someone you love is suddenly very interested in your accounts, your property, your healthcare documents, get your own attorney, not their attorney, not their friend who does estate work. Yours. One you found yourself, one who works only for you. Don't let them take you to the bank when you're tired. Don't let anyone be listed as co-owner of anything. Beneficiary is different. Co-owner means now. And keep one friend who's good with numbers and has no reason to lie to you. That's worth more than almost anything. I still sit in Marion's chair on quiet evenings. I still talk to her, sometimes. Last week I told her the peace lily had 2 new blooms. I told her I was okay. I meant it. I've had a lot of time to think about how this happened. Not just what my son did, but how I let the conditions exist for it to happen at all. I think about the bank account. The day he drove me there, the day I was tired and let him do most of the talking. I signed something I didn't fully read because I trusted him, and because I didn't want to be the kind of father who treats his own son like a suspect. That's not weakness, exactly. But it is a choice, and choices have weight. That account being opened the way it was, that wasn't an accident on his part. It was patient. It was planned. And I had been moving through my days assuming that the people closest to me were operating in good faith, because for most of my life, they were. That assumption was the door he walked through. I don't think people who do what my son did are born that way. I think something shifts in a person when they start doing the math on someone else's life. When they look at a parent, a person who fed them, coached their little league team, sat in the waiting room during their emergency appendectomy at age 14, and they see an asset to be managed. I don't know when that shift happened for him. I'm not sure it matters now. What I know is that greed, when it takes hold of a person, tends to make them impatient. And impatience makes people sloppy. The clause in that POA, the co-owner status on the account, bringing an estate planner to my house unannounced on a Tuesday, all of it was rushed. All of it had the fingerprints of someone who had convinced themselves they were smarter than they were. He wasn't smarter. He was just counting on me not to look closely. So the lesson I carry, the one I'd hand to any person in my position, is this. Looking closely is not a betrayal of trust. It is the most responsible thing an adult can do for themselves. Reading a document before you sign it is not an insult to the person who handed it to you. Asking questions is not aggression. Getting your own attorney is not paranoia. These are the habits of a person who respects themselves enough to stay in control of their own life. Harvey taught me something once, years ago, when we were both younger and neither of us thought much about estate planning. He said, the people who end up protected are usually not the people who trusted more. They are the people who verified more. I filed that away and forgot it for 20 years. I wish I hadn't. Patricia Owens recovered $14,000 and probably saved everything else. She did it because I called Harvey and Harvey knew her, and I acted before the situation became irreversible. That window, between the moment you suspect something and the moment you've lost everything, is smaller than most people think. My son was counting on me to spend that window feeling hurt instead of moving. I chose to move. That is the only thing I did right in this whole story, and I want to say plainly, the moment you feel something is wrong, act. Not out of anger, not out of vengeance. Deliberately, quietly, with the right people beside you. Dignity is not the same as passivity. You can be calm and still fight for what's yours. You can love someone and still refuse to let them take from you. Those things are not opposites. My son made his choices. I made mine. The house is still mine. The peace lily is still on the windowsill, and I sleep fine.